Have you ever thought you knew someone, only to discover they'd been hiding something huge? That's exactly what happened when the man I'd been dating for 6 months, a successful millionaire who swore he had no kids, showed up to Thanksgiving with a little girl and completely turned my world upside down. What I discovered that day changed everything. My name is Emmy, and 6 months ago, I met what I thought was the perfect man. James walked into the charity gala where I was working as an event coordinator, and honestly, it felt like something out of a movie. Tall, confident, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. But what caught me wasn't the money. It was the way he looked at me when I was explaining the silent auction items. "You're passionate about this work," he'd said, and actually seemed interested in my answer. We talked for 2 hours. He was a tech executive, 42 years old, never married. "Married to my company for too long," he'd joked. When I asked about kids, he'd been clear: no children. The corporate life doesn't leave much room for family. I was 30, newly out of a relationship with a guy who couldn't commit to anything beyond next weekend's plans. James felt different, stable, mature, intentional. Our first date turned into a second, then a third. By month 3, I was falling hard. He was generous but not showy, thoughtful in ways that mattered, remembering I mentioned loving orchids and sending one to my office, asking about my mum's surgery, making reservations at places he knew I'd been wanting to try. When November came around and my mum invited me to bring someone to Thanksgiving, I hesitated. Meeting the family felt significant, but James had smiled and said, "I'd love to meet the people who raised such an incredible woman." The night before Thanksgiving he called, "Emmy, I need to bring someone with me tomorrow. I hope that's okay." My stomach dropped. "Someone? I'll explain everything when I see you." Trust me, I didn't sleep that night. My mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. An ex-wife, a business partner, another woman. Thanksgiving morning, I was a wreck. My sister Katie noticed immediately. "You look like you're going to throw up," she said, tying her apron in my mum's kitchen. "James is bringing someone." I told her. He wouldn't tell me who. Katie's eyes widened. "Oh God, is he breaking up with you at Thanksgiving? That's psychotic." "Thanks, that makes me feel so much better." The doorbell rang at noon, right on time. I opened it, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. James stood there in dark jeans and a burgundy sweater, looking nervous in a way I'd never seen. And next to him, holding his hand, was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old, with dark curls pulled into 2 ponytails, wearing a navy dress with white tights, and clutching a stuffed unicorn. "Emmy," James said softly, "this is Sophie. Sophie, this is the special lady I told you about." Sophie looked up at me with enormous brown eyes. "Hi," she whispered shyly. I stood frozen in the doorway, my brain completely short-circuiting. The man who told me he had no children had just introduced me to a child. His child. It was obvious in the shape of her face, the color of her eyes. "Can we come in?" James asked quietly. "I know you have questions. I promise I'll explain everything." Somehow, I stepped aside. Sophie walked past me, still holding James's hand, looking around my mum's house with curious eyes. Behind me, I heard Katie's sharp intake of breath. My mum, bless her, recovered first. "Well, hello there, sweetheart. I'm Emmy's mum, but you can call me Mrs. Chen. Are you hungry? We have so much food." Sophie nodded, a small smile appearing. "I like turkey." "Then you came to the right place," Mum said, shooting me a look that said we'd talk later. I pulled James into the hallway, my hands shaking. "What the hell is going on? You told me you didn't have kids." "I know." His face was pained. "Emmy, please let me explain. It's complicated. Complicated. You lied to me." "I didn't lie," he said urgently. "When we met, I legally didn't have a child. Sophie's biological parents, my brother and his wife, died in a car accident 8 months ago. I've been fighting for custody ever since. The courts just finalized it 2 weeks ago." The anger drained out of me, replaced by shock. "Your brother, my younger brother David, and his wife Michelle, they were driving home from a concert when a drunk driver hit them head-on. Both died instantly." His voice cracked. "Sophie was at a sleeper with her best friend. She survived because of a playdate." I leaned against the wall, processing. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it was a nightmare, Emmy. The custody battle. Michelle's parents wanted Sophie. They blamed David for the accident, said he was driving too fast. They tried to paint me as an unfit guardian, Because I'm single and work too much. I couldn't talk about it without falling apart, and I didn't want to drag you into that chaos when we were just getting to know each other. But 6 months, James. I know. He ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. I know it was too long, but every time I tried to tell you, something happened. Another court date, another lawyer meeting, Sophie having a breakdown about missing her parents. I was drowning, and you were the one good thing in my life. I was terrified that if I told you, you'd leave. I looked through the doorway at Sophie, who was now sitting at the kids' table with my nephew, carefully coloring a turkey placemat. She doesn't know you were planning to tell me today. She knows I was bringing her to meet someone important. Emmy, I finally have legal custody. Sophie is mine now, permanently, which means she's part of my life. And if you're going to be part of my life, you need to meet her. I couldn't keep you two separate anymore. Lunch was surreal. I sat across from Sophie, watching her interact with my family. She was polite, quiet, clearly still adjusting to her new reality. When my nephew asked about her parents, she said simply, "They're in heaven now. Uncle James takes care of me." Uncle James, not Dad. That detail broke my heart. After lunch, while the adults were having coffee and the men were watching football, I found Sophie sitting alone on the back porch, wrapped in her coat, talking to her unicorn. "Mind if I sit?" I asked. She shook her head. I sat down on the porch step beside her. "Your unicorn is very pretty. Does she have a name?" "Starlight. My mummy gave her to me for my birthday last year." Sophie's voice was matter of fact, but I heard the pain underneath. "That's a beautiful name. I bet your mummy had good taste." Sophie nodded. "She was really pretty, and she made the best chocolate chip cookies. Uncle James tries, but they're not the same." "Uncle James loves you very much," I said carefully. "I know." Sophie looked at me with those big eyes. "Are you his girlfriend?" I hesitated. We've been spending time together." "Yes." "Are you going to be my new mummy?" The question hit me like a punch to the chest. "Oh, sweetie. That's not really how it works. My friend Emma's daddy got a new girlfriend after her mummy left, and now she calls her mummy number 2. Sophie kicked her feet against the step. "I don't want a mummy number 2. I just want my real mummy back." Tears pricked my eyes. "I know you do, honey, and nobody's trying to replace your mum. She'll always be your mum, and nobody can change that. Promise." Sophie's voice was small. "I promise." I meant it with everything in me. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Sophie said, "Uncle James smiles more when he talks about you. He was really sad for a long time, but now he's less sad." Something shifted in my chest. This little girl, dealing with more grief than anyone should have to bear, was worried about her uncle's happiness. That night, after James had taken Sophie home, I sat with my mum and Katie in the kitchen. "So," Katie said, "that was intense." "He should have told you," Mom said firmly. "But I understand why he didn't." "Do you?" I asked. "Because I'm not sure I do." 6 months, Mom. He kept this from me for 6 months. He was protecting a traumatized child, Mom said gently, and probably protecting himself too. "Emmy, that man is drowning. Did you see how exhausted he looked? He's trying to run a company, care for a grieving 7-year-old, and maintain a relationship. Something had to give." "Yeah, and it was honesty with me." Katie leaned forward. "Are you mad he lied, or are you scared?" I looked at her. "What? Be honest. Are you actually angry about the timing, or are you terrified, because dating a guy with a kid, especially a kid dealing with that kind of trauma, is way more than you signed up for?" I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. She was right. I was scared, terrified. "Actually, I like him," I admitted. "I really like him, but Katie, I don't know if I'm ready to be whatever Sophie needs. I'm 30. I was still figuring out my own life. I wasn't planning on potentially helping raise a traumatized 7-year-old. Nobody plans for tragedy," Mom said. "Life doesn't ask if you're ready. But honey, the question isn't whether you're ready. It's whether you love him enough to try." Did I love him? I hadn't let myself think that word yet. But sitting there in my mum's kitchen, I realized the answer was yes. I loved his kindness, his integrity, the way he'd stepped up for Sophie without hesitation. I loved how he made me laugh, how he listened when I talked about my work, how he remembered the little things. And if I loved him, then Sophie was part of that package. The next morning, I called James. "Can we talk?" The three of us. He sounded surprised but hopeful. Of course. When?
Today.
I'll come to you. His apartment was different than I'd imagined. Less polished bachelor pad, more makeshift family home. There were toys in the corner of the living room, children's books on the coffee table, and drawings held to the refrigerator with magnets. Sophie was watching cartoons when I arrived. She looked up and gave me a small wave. Hi, Sophie. Hi, James. I sat down on the couch. I wanted to talk to both of you about something important. James sat down, looking nervous. Sophie turned off the TV and came to sit between us. First, James. I need to say this, you should have told me about Sophie earlier. It hurt that you didn't trust me with something so important. I know, he said quietly. I'm sorry, but I continued. I understand why you didn't, and I understand that you were trying to protect Sophie, and that matters. What matters more, though, is what happens now. Sophie was watching me intently. Sophie, I want you to know something. I'm not trying to replace your mum. Nobody could ever do that. Your mum loved you so much, and she'll always be your mum. But if it's okay with you, I'd like to be your friend, and I'd like to keep spending time with your Uncle James. Would you come to things? Sophie asked. Like my school play. I'm a turkey in the Thanksgiving show next week. I smiled. If you want me there, I would love to come watch you be a turkey. Okay. Sophie thought for a moment. Can you teach Uncle James to make better cookies? His are really bad. I laughed. And James laughed too, the tension breaking. I can definitely do that. Sophie climbed into James's lap and whispered something in his ear. He smiled and whispered back. Then she looked at me and said, Uncle James said, you're nice and you make him happy. I think that's good. James reached across Sophie and took my hand. Emmy, I know this isn't what you signed up for. If it's too much, I understand. But if you're willing to give us a chance, give all of us a chance. I promise I'll never keep something this important from you again. I looked at this man who'd inherited a child in the worst possible circumstances, and was doing everything he could to honor his brother's memory. I looked at this little girl who'd lost everything, but was still brave enough to let new people into her life. And I thought about what my mum had said. The question wasn't whether I was ready, it was whether I loved him enough to try. I'm in, I said. I'm scared, and I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm in. Sophie cheered. James pulled me into a hug. Sophie squished between us, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel that week. Hope. 3 months later, I went to Sophie's winter concert. 6 months after that, I helped her learn to ride a bike. A year later, when she drew a picture of her family for school, she drew 4 people, her mum and dad in heaven, Uncle James and me. It wasn't the relationship I'd planned for. It was better. Life rarely goes according to plan, does it? Sometimes the most beautiful relationships come with unexpected packages, grief, complications, children, pasts we didn't anticipate. But I've learned that love isn't about finding someone with no baggage. It's about finding someone whose baggage you're willing to help carry. Have you ever had to make a choice between what you planned for and what your heart wanted? Have you walked away, or did you take the leap? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Sometimes the most unbelievable things turn out to be the most worthwhile.